Why, hello there, everyone. I just finished watching episode 4 of Gundam, The Witch from Mercury, and this will probably be the shortest video so far, the shortest episode review so far, just because I don't think I have a lot to say about it, even though I did like the episode quite a bit. It was just definitely more of a simple one, hence why I don't expect to talk as long, but we will see. So, firstly, picking up immediately where the last episode left off, Yule is kind of a tsundere at the beginning because he is saying that he didn't actually mean the proposal, the marriage proposal, right? But obviously he did. It's just that either he's embarrassed about being rejected and is saying, oh, well, I didn't mean it anyway, right? Something like that. Or maybe he's just embarrassed about them recording him, because obviously, based on his reaction to the camera, it doesn't seem as if he was aware that he was actively being recorded when he did the marriage proposal, but also, and I think this is most likely it's possible it's some kind of combination thereof, right? But I think the main thing is that he's kind of surprised himself that he even said such a thing. And he kind of did it on a whim, right? He kind of impulsively did it because I think he literally just got the idea right then and there and then impulsively said it. And post hoc, he is kind of confused himself as to why he would say something like that, right? So I think he's probably going to have to do some more introspecting before coming to terms with whether or not he actually did mean it. But as of right now, his official stance is that he did not mean it, even though it's obviously a bit more nuanced than that, right? But the whole episode was mostly about Chuchu in terms of the other characters that have appeared but haven't gotten much characterization yet. And two things I want to say about Chuchu, first of all. One of these things is actually a bit of trivia, and the other one's a question. So the question is, how can Chuchu's hair fit into that helmet, right? I'm sure everyone else was wondering the same thing. I would love to see her actually put the helmet on and just to see how all of the hair gets like condensed down into a tight enough space to fit in the helmet, right? If they're ever going to animate that, that would be funny. And then the trivia thing is, do you guys actually know what Chuchu means? Because Chuchu means, well, it's actually supposed to imitate the sound of a kiss in Japanese. The only reason I know that actually is because there's a Hatsune Miku song. There's a song you can play in the Hatsune Miku games called Dreaming Chuchu. And I kept on hearing the lyrics in it, and I kept wondering, what does Dreaming Chuchu mean? What does Chuchu mean? So I looked it up back when I was playing Hatsune Miku. I think that's... I always think of that song whenever I hear Chuchu, just because that's the first time I was actually actively wondering about it and looked it up. So that is what her nickname means, which would be obvious to a Japanese audience watching the show, right? So I had to bring that up because you can hear the character say her whole name. It's definitely a Gundam name, right? But Chuchu is just a nickname. Anyway, the actual plot of the episode revolves around this exam in which the students have to navigate a minefield. They have to navigate through a minefield and get to the end, and there's also a time limit. And Chuchu is in there, and Suletta is in there, obviously. And Chuchu gets screwed over pretty hard in this first run of the exam because these cheaters, these Spacian cheaters, sprayed this delayed spray on the camera. They spray it on the camera, right? And it's invisible or it's clear. But then there is a delayed, I'm assuming it's some kind of chemical reaction, right? That reacts to the air. But it is a slow-acting sealant or opaqueness, right? And so that makes it where she can't see, and then she fails the first run of the exam, so then she has to go do the retry exam, the makeup exam, right? And Suletta also has to do the makeup exam, so they're going to be stuck in there together. And I thought this was so mean at first, because Suletta instantly gets disqualified from the first run of the exam. She auto-fails it immediately, and she's super shocked, right? And she even asks why. And they say it's because you need to have a mechanic and someone else, some other person on the team, the pit crew, basically. And I thought that was so mean at first because I was thinking, why in the world would this faculty allow her to get this far and go all the way towards getting ready to start this exam without having her actual team, right? Because I'm sure several of the faculty saw her without any kind of pit crew around, and they probably knew, but they just didn't say anything. But realistically, I'm assuming that she probably was told somewhere at one point, maybe on some kind of thing she was supposed to read but didn't fully read, or maybe it was in some kind of fine print somewhere or something like that. That would be the most realistic explanation, right? Because in real life, things like that happen all the time, in which you don't do something or you didn't know you were supposed to do something and everybody else knows and they act like it was common sense, even though the only reason they know is because they've been doing this thing for so long. And the only reason you missed it is because it's so unintuitive or it was written somewhere really small or something like that. So I actually thought that was a pretty realistic depiction of how schools work. Right? It could be extended to other things too, but obviously this is a school in this case. So Chuchu and Suletta are going to be doing the makeup exam, like I said. But the whole dilemma for Suletta in this case is that she has to go join a house to get the mechanic and the other pit crew member whose role escapes me right now. But I was a bit confused what they meant by house at first, because when they said house, it was making me think family, right? Like you have to join some kind of family with a shared last name. But the sense I got is that in this context, a house is more of a club. It's more so just a club, right? That's the sense I got. And so she goes around trying to find one. She eventually is led to the same one that Chuchu's a part of. The same one that Chuchu is part of. Whenever it comes to saying a part of, I always just choose to say part of instead, because a part of phonetically could sound like the single word apart, which is the opposite of what I mean, obviously. So Chuchu shows up, and Chuchu's being a little prejudiced towards her because Chuchu doesn't like the Spacians, right? So she assumes Suletta is like all the other Spacians that she has dealt with thus far, and essentially kicks her out. So then Suletta's kind of on her own again, and she basically just crashes at Miorine's place, and Miorine isn't actually technically part of a house, but she's able to fulfill both of the roles of the pit crew, because apparently she's already familiar enough with that kind of stuff, right? And so it's obviously not an ideal situation, but it's a two-man party instead of the ideal three. And we get a little bit of world building here, actually. So Suletta wants to found a school at Mercury. So this is also a bit of character motives as well. So Suletta wants to graduate so she can go back and found a school on Mercury, because apparently Mercury doesn't have any schools. It used to have a few schools, but not anymore, because apparently the population on Mercury is way less than it was before due to not as many people needing to be there to mine permit. I still don't know what permit is exactly, right? But it is presumably some kind of material. But they were saying that they're now mining for permit on the moon. So I'm guessing Mercury used to be one of, if not the only places where they could mine for permit. And that must have been the cause for the original population being there, and then with permit being discovered on the moon, or it now just being mineable on the moon, they're now doing it there because it's closer to Earth, right? And so that's the first bit of world building we got about that. So maybe that's why characters like Ghoul were calling her a country bumpkin, right? Just because not many people live on Mercury, not necessarily because they do farming or anything like that. But anyways, the next day they do the makeup exam, and they're having to go in order in this case. And so Chuchu is after Suletta. And Suletta is a victim of the cheating as well, so she can't see anything because those cheaters sprayed the stuff on her main camera. And so Chuchu's just having to wait on her as she's retrying it over and over and over, right? And I actually really liked this part when Suletta just starts crying, because not only is it a pretty realistic situation for someone just stressing out, worrying about not being able to graduate, but also because So far, we've seen Suletta as a very overpowered main character, mostly just due to her aptitude for the Gundam aerial and its bits, its funnels, right? Because that's obviously a super overpowered thing, and that's why she's been able to win her fights so far. So it's nice that they are still showing Suletta as a somewhat vulnerable character, because if you're going to have a character win every fight, they need to have some kind of weakness elsewhere, right? So obviously showing that she still is emotionally vulnerable is the correct and proper way to write a, quote, overpowered main character, right? And then Chuchu notices the reaction that those two Spacian girls had. They obviously weren't trying to hide it very well. So she caught on based on their reaction whenever Suletta was having trouble that they were the cause of it. Wasn't that hard to make the connection. Like I said, they weren't really trying to hide it at all. And so even though Chuchu was a little prejudiced towards Suletta at first, since Suletta was also a Spacian, I think this is one of those classic cases of an enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? Because seeing that those Spacians are picking on another Spacian, it pretty much proves that Suletta isn't like them. Plus, I'm not sure if Chuchu could actually hear Suletta crying in there, because she was talking at one point. I might need to go back and rewatch that. But Chuchu did open up the comms to tell her to hurry up, but before she started crying. She was telling her to hurry up because she kept on having to retake it over and over. She kept on retrying because she kept running out of time. And that's because Chuchu was going second, right? And she kept on waiting, and she didn't want to keep waiting around. So I know that they were able to talk to each other there, but I don't know if the comms were still open. Might need to go back and rewatch that part. Someone can just let me know in the comments, though, if they happen to remember. But whether Chuchu heard Suletta crying or not, I think she still got a sense of Suletta just going through a hard time right there, right? Obviously, if she could hear her crying, she would be able to hear that she was having a tough time. But even without hearing her crying, just seeing her having to retake this over and over and over, and then seeing her just suddenly stop, you can assume that anyone in that kind of situation would be having a tough time, right? So, and this is probably the highlight of the episode for most people. Chuchu gets out and walks up and just absolutely slumps that one Spacian that's sitting down. It's strangely well animated too. And I really like the fact that they literally just passed out, like they literally got knocked out cold and just stayed there leaning over throughout that entire scene. Because so many times in media, when someone gets punched, they don't get knocked out, and I think it's just because animators really like animating some kind of reaction afterwards, or having the writers have a character react to getting punched. But like I said, this character just got absolutely slumped, and then she starts fighting the second one, who is obviously able to react a bit better to this. And then Suletta runs over there to break up the fighting, since Suletta is obviously a bit more of a pacifist than Chuchu. And she tries to break it up to no avail, because then she ends up getting punched. And then Chuchu does hit the second one as well, presumably knocking her out cold as well. I don't know, because when she got punched, it was from a first-person perspective, and then there was a short time skip, and it just went to another scene, right? But presumably, she nailed the second one pretty good as well. And like I said, I imagine that's the highlight of the episode for most people. I kind of want to go back and watch it. So we've had slapping so far, but now we've had actual punching. We didn't have a Gundam fight per se, but we still had a fight after all. And then after that, because Chuchu maybe softened up to Suletta a bit more after that, Chuchu sort of begrudgingly allows Suletta to join her house. And so I think the whole point of that is that now, since she is technically in a, quote, house, it's sort of officialized a main party for the main characters for the remainder of the show, or at least for the next several episodes to kick everything off, because even if other characters aren't necessarily part of that house, like Miorine or Guel, I could definitely see those other supporting characters sort of just hanging out around the house. So not actually technically being part of the same house as Suletta and Chuchu, but just unofficially hanging out and unofficially being part of it in terms of just the same sort of friend group. obviously it's going to have to work up to that, especially with Guel, right? But I could definitely see that being the reason for why you pretty much had an entire episode of Chuchu sort of acquainting herself with Suletta and officializing this party, which they call a house in this case, right? So let me know what you guys thought about the episode. I enjoyed it myself, and of course, obviously, next episode is going to be episode 5, and I don't know if this is actually statistically true, but to me, it always seems as if episode 5 is usually when something big happens in any kind of anime. Usually the first 5 episodes seems to be a typical range of a show kind of getting started and establishing its world building and everything, right? So I'm thinking from episode 5 onwards, it's going to be getting even spicier. And also, I was actually debating if I should mention this in this video or if I should just mention it on the episode 5 review, but I might as well mention it now because I might be posting the episode 5 review after this thing, which I'm about to announce, and that is the fact that I actually got invited to be on this podcast. It's a Patreon podcast, so I can put the link in the description if you guys want to check it out. But I got invited to the Giant Robo FM podcast, so I'm going to be a guest speaker on said podcast talking about the first 5 episodes of the show. So we're going to record it after everyone has seen the first 5 episodes, and presumably we're just going to talk about the first 5 episodes and see what happens. So I'm going to be mentioning this again on the next episode review. In that case, though, I'll be mentioning it at the start. And with all that said, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys later. So bye for now.